Hello dear viewers, support me by subscribing to my channel and share my video if you like it, and also make sure you comment your thought. Now let's start the video. Cersei Lannister had learned long ago to never have faith in men. She had learned that men could not be depended upon for anything as a girl. Her father had always been cold, unloving, and immovable, and that had only worsened once her mother had died. Her mother's death had been Tyrion's fault, but their father had allowed the monster to live. She had dreamt of becoming Rhaegar's bride when she was young, but that too was for naught. Then, after blood and war, she had become the queen. She had been wed to the young, handsome, charming Robert Baratheon. She could have been happy. She could have loved him. Instead, he had called her Lyanna as he claimed her body. The only man whom she had ever trusted was Jaime, her twin, her heart. Yet even he had abandoned her in her time of need. Cersei turned uneasily upon her bed. Sleep was refusing to come to her. She dared not call for another cup of dream wine, as the first three had worn off without a whisper of sleep to ease her mind. Her mind had not ceased turning since her conversation with Lord Stark had ended. She worried that she had said too much. She worried that he knew too much. A part of her wished to run, as Lord Stark had suggested, to run to a place where she and her children could be safe, where she and Jaime could be together. A larger part of her refused to run. She was the queen and her son would be king. Eddard Stark could not overthrow her. He could not defeat Tywin Lannister. He would never be able to tell his beloved Robert Baratheon the truth about her children. If Lancel did his job, King Robert's days would surely be at an end. Did she really have such faith in Lancel? If Lancel failed her in his task, she shuddered at the thought. "I will be free," she hissed into the warm night air. "You cannot take the crown from me, Eddard Stark. You will not take it from my son." She was too tired to leave her bed. Her mind was too full of stresses for her to sleep. She turned from her back to her side, curling toward herself. She wished for Jaime. She wished that he had never thrown the Stark boy from the tower in Winterfell. She wished that he had not attacked Lord Stark. The king's hunts had always been their time to spend with one another. Instead, she was alone to face the wolves, because her brother had made heedless decisions. She awoke late in the morning when her handmaids were cleaning her bedchamber. She had no idea when she had fallen asleep. One moment she had been awake, and the next it was morning. Food and drink were already laid out for her. Her handmaids gave her a quick sponge bath, dressed her, and brushed out her hair before she sat at the table to eat. She scarcely ate anything. Her anxieties made the food seem bland and stale. How long could it possibly take for Robert to die? Perhaps she was foolish for trusting her cousin to accomplish the task which she had set before him. If Robert returned alive, and Ned was able to tell him the truth about her children. But would Ned's suspicions be proof? No, but her confession to Lord Stark would be proof enough. She should have kept her silence. She should have told him off in horror. Actually, he had always told her that pride would be her undoing. "Mayen," she called to one of her handmaids. The slip of a girl appeared beside the table at once. "Have Lord Baelish meet me in my drawing room." The creature seemed out of sorts at the command. "Now, your grace." Cersei raised a golden brow. Was everyone in the Red Keep a fool? "As soon as he can be found. I do not want to be kept waiting long." "Of course, your grace." The girl bowed low and hurried from the room. Her robes fluttered behind her as though she were a little bird. It was nearly 4 hours later when Lord Baxley arrived. Cersei was strongly considering replacing Mayen with a girl who could follow orders more swiftly. Truly, Cersei had no complaints about how long it had been since she had sent the girl to find him. In the time which had passed, she had finished eating her meal and had finished dressing for the day. She was seated upon a chaise, one of her sitting rooms. The room was filled with sunlight which entered the room through large open windows. The breeze was warm and strong, cooling the room on such a warm summer day. She was reading when Lord Baelish finally arrived. He smiled politely to her and bowed respectfully upon entering. "Your Grace, I apologize for the delay in my arrival. I was visiting the city this morning." She set her book aside and gestured for him to be seated. One of her handmaidens poured wine for Cersei and Lord Baxley. "At your brothels, I do not doubt," she muttered. "A man must earn his wage in whatever ways he can." "Your Grace," he favored her with a smile. She despised his smiles. His smiles always seemed to condescend. His eyes never seemed to reflect the emotions he was attempting to portray. He sipped his wine slowly before he continued. How may I be of service? Tell me, Lord Bache, has there been any word of my husband, the king? She did not bother with any sort of preamble or pretext. She had not slept long enough for word games. He raised a brow, likely in surprise, though his face remained otherwise neutral. There has been no word of the king since Prince Joffrey and the other members of the hunting party arrived. Have you missed your husband so terribly? His lips spoke the words in jest, but she could feel the barb in them. It is the realm for which I am concerned. The hand has been making many decisions of which the king must be informed. Oh, I am certain that the king has heard about some of Lord Stark's decisions. Knowing his grace, that will only extend the hunting trip. Hopefully extending the trip would provide Lancel ample opportunity to rid the world of Robert Baratheon. If that is his grace's will, then it shall be his will, though I would rather not have this realm torn to pieces by the whims of Lord Stark. I am uncertain Lord Stark is capable of acting upon a whim, your grace. Though I have heard interesting tales of his actions of late. Did he know? No, of course it could not know anything. Meaning? Are you aware that Prince Oberin Martell is a guest of the Hand? Of course I am. Her reply was terse. She took no pleasure in the presence of the Dornish prince within the walls of the Red Keep, but all reports indicated that he was merely visiting Lord Eddard. What exactly that meant, she was uncertain. Prince Oberyn knew the Stark bastards, but coming to visit them in King's Landing was unusual. Cersei doubted that the men liked one another. Not after the actions of Rhaegar Targaryen regarding Princess Aelia and Lady Lyanna. And yet, could Winterfell and Dorne be plotting together against the crown? Could they be working against her? I was told that Prince Oberyn is visiting Lord Stark and will be returning the bastards of the Hand to Dorne. Will he? Lord Batsley's smirk returned. She wished that she could remove that smile from him permanently. Do you have something to tell me about them? She kept her words sweet and calm. It would not be to her benefit to return to seem disturbed by whatever Lord Littlefinger told her. It seems that all of Lord Stark's children were spirited away yesterday with Lord Beric Dondarrion and a small company of riders. All she could not keep the edge from her voice. For a moment it seemed as though there was no air in the room. He bowed solemnly, swirling the wine in his goblet. Lord Eddard remains, as do his men. Prince Oberyn and his men are still here as well. The Lady Sansa and Arya, as well as the bastards of Lord Stark, are all gone. They were last seen heading south. Her limbs felt suddenly heavy. He must have sent away the children before meeting with her. He had said that he wanted the children to be safe. He had said that he wanted her children to be safe as well. Fleeing the capital seemed even more tempting in that moment. Cersei had heard many stories about the deaths of Eake Mortal and her children. She could not imagine her own children in such a state. The very idea stole the air from her lungs and seized her heart. Yet she knew that her father would not see his daughter or grandchildren die without a fight. Dorne was weak, and the north was leagues away. Casterly Rock could muster its armies faster and in greater force than either of those kingdoms. The throne was hers. The throne was her son's. Thank you for bringing that to my attention. Lord Ye. She hoped that her voice seemed convincingly calm. Tell me, if Lord Stark and Prince Oberyn Martell were to attempt to wrest control of the city away from the king and myself, are we able to be protected? He seemed intrigued at the notion. I do not believe that Lord Stark would betray his friend, the king. However, my queen, you should rest assured that you are safe. There are thousands of gold cloaks who can and will protect you, your grace, from any threat you may face. Something in Lord Littlefinger's voice betrayed a lack of confidence in the friendship between Ned Stark and Robert Baratheon. Did Littlefinger know the truth about her children? She cursed Jaime for leaving her alone. My father once served as hand to King Aerys. They had been friends in their youth as Lord Eddard and King Robert were. Wouldn't you agree that friendships can end? His lips quirked into a twisted smile. As that I am well aware. Then understand me well, Lord Bear. Yes, I am the queen. It is my duty to ensure the safety of the kingdom for the sake of my children. You are our master of coin. As such, you are responsible for financing the gold cloaks. As you say, your grace. And you are paid by myself and my family, are you not? He bowed in agreement. I am, your grace. She smiled at him, a lion's smile. I do hope that you will remember my father's wealth and tendency to crush any who would seek to harm his family. should any need arise which would lend itself toward using the gold cloaks for the protection of myself and my children." He finished his drink and smiled. "Your Grace can rest assured that I remember such things perpetually." "Then we are done here, Lord Begus." He stood and bowed deeply to her. "Your Grace." She watched him leave and sipped her wine. She felt oddly at peace. Lancel would assist Robert Baratheon to his grave. The gold cloaks would protect herself and her children should Lord Stark or the Dornish prince attempt to move against her. Joffrey, her precious boy, would be king. She stood and walked to the window. The breeze tugged at her hair, and she smiled. Perhaps she finally had found a man or two upon whom she could rely. With her eyes closed, she began to hum to herself. "And who are you," the proud lord said, "that I must bow so low?" In the dark of the night, ill news arrived. The king's steward brought word that the king wished to see Eddard Stark. Ned was assisted by his men, Tomard and Cain, from the Tower of the Hand to Macros Holdfast. At the Holdfast and inside, they passed Sirs Boris Blount, Preston Greenfield, and Sirs Barristan Selmy of the King's Guard. Eventually they reached and were admitted into the king's chambers. Inside, Ned found his friend, Robert Baratheon, upon his deathbed. Grandmaster Pyxell was attending the king. The queen was seated near her husband, her face displaying concern. She seemed to be rather awake for such a late hour. Lord Rensley was inside the room as well, pacing with a nervous energy. Countless servants were hurrying about the room, assisting the maester. Ned looked upon his friend and his heart broke. The king was wounded from hip to breast, ripped open by the tusks of a boar. They spoke briefly before Robert dismissed everyone except for Ned. Robert had a change of heart regarding Daenerys Targaryen. He had ordered for an assassin to be sent to kill the girl. Robert claimed that the gods had sent the boar as a punishment for the order and told Ned that the girl should be spared if at all possible. Then he had Ned write out the writ of succession. The king named Ned as protector of the realm and regent for Joffrey, until the boy was to come of age. Ned could not bear to tell his friend the truth about his presumed children. He could not hurt his friend as he lay dying. When the order was written, with Ned writing "my heir" in place of "my son," Ned reopened the door to the king's chamber. The servants returned, as did Renly and the master who witnessed the seal upon the letter. King Robert's last request was for Ned to take care of his children. Ned promised him, pained by lying, until he thought upon the king's bastards whom he could protect. Pyxell gave Robert milk of the poppy to drink, and the king drifted off to sleep. Ned and Renly left the room where they briefly spoke with Sir Barristan and Varys. They spoke of the hunt where Robert had been wounded. Renly was awed by his brother killing the boar, though he was mortally wounded. Sir Barristan seemed distraught that he had been unable to protect the king. Ned assured the man that it was not his fault that Robert had chosen to hunt a boar while too drunk to stand straight. When Varys asked who had given the wine to the king, he learned that the wine had come from Lancel Lannister, the queen's cousin. They had given Ned much to ponder, but for the moment he wanted nothing more to be alone. He made his way back to the entrance of Magwar's Holdfast. Varys slipped away some time before they arrived at the bridge, and Sir Barristan had remained at the door to the king's chamber. Ned's men were assisting him across the bridge when Rensley emerged from the keep as well. He approached and asked that they might speak alone. Ned agreed and sent his men away. Tomard and Cain bowed their heads and walked to the end of the bridge, far enough away that they could not overhear whatever Lord Rensley wished to say. Lord Rensley's gaze flitted from Sarah Bors to Sarah Preston, who stood at either end of the bridge before he moved closer to whisper to Ned. "That letter is about the Regency, isn't it? My brother has named you Lord Protector." He did not pause for an affirmative answer. "My lord, I have 30 men in my personal guard, and other friends beside, knights and lords. Give me an hour, and I can put 100 swords in your hand." Swords? What would he need of swords? Ned's closest friend was at death's door. He wanted to mourn, not fight. "And what should I do with 100 swords, my lord?" "Strike. Now while the castle sleeps." His voice was hushed, yet fevered. He still glanced warily at the two Kingsguard. He suggested that Eddard should take Joffrey, Tommen and Myrcella into custody as prisoners in order to control Cersei and the council. Ned thought of Robert, his friend, near death, though he was fighting hard to remain alive. He thought about the Targaryen children who had been pulled from their beds and murdered the last time the matter of succession was overthrown. Robert is upon his deathbed, and you want me to drag children from their beds? Every moment that you delay gives Cersei another moment to prepare. She's no friend to you or I. If we wait until Robert dies..." He shifted anxiously again, and his eyes froze upon an approaching figure, who was walking across the courtyard of the Red Keep. Prince Oberin Martell, just the man whom Ned did not want to see at that moment. "Oberin," Ned spoke up in greeting. "Why are you here?" The man approached the bridge, causing Ned's men and the King's Guard to notice his presence. "You do recall that I cannot sleep in this place. I was taking a walk when I heard an unpleasant rumor and wanted to see what I could learn. By your presence, I would venture to guess that the rumor is true." Ned glanced between the two men and could almost see the plans they were weaving in their own minds. Ned's leg was throbbing in pain and his heart was weary. He wanted nothing to do with plots, schemes, and the follies of kings. "Lord Rensley," Ned said as Oberyn drew near. "May I introduce you to Prince Oberyn Martell?" Prince Oberyn, Renly's greeting was stiff but polite. He seemed to be measuring something in his mind. "Lord Rensley," Oberyn replied, "it is a pleasure to make your acquaintance, though the circumstances must be upsetting for yourself." The Lord of Storm's End bowed his head in acknowledgement of Oberyn's greeting. He then turned to face Ned. Would he do it? Ned knew the answer. It was all that Dorne had been seeking for years. Revenge. If Oberyn Martell was not there, beside him or within the Red Keep, Ned could make a different choice. With the Red Viper beside him, the only option was to betray his friend. Again, a brief consideration for how fleeting honor, honesty, and loyalty had become passed through Ned's mind. How had he become the man he was? Little by little, bit by bit, the quiet young man who had tried to be good, honorable, and honest had made so many compromises that the bitter taste never quite left his mouth. He would have to side with Renly, but would they have enough men to do the deed? If they captured the Lannister children, would they be able to hold them captive? What would the next step be? Ned's answer was firm and bitter. You will win the love of Dorne when his sister is avenged and Tywin Lannister is brought to his knees. Is that what you are prepared to do? Oberyn's eyes glittered in the dim light of torches and the full moon. He looked between the two men, appraising the situation in silence. Grudgingly considered both men and bowed his head in thought. Ned looked down, seeing the writ of succession which he clutched in his hand. Queen Cersei's children were bastards, no true heirs to King Robert. Ned had written the words, "my heir," instead of "my son," in the order of the regency. Should the regency pass to a Baratheon heir, the crown should go to Stannis Baratheon, the second of Lord Steffan Baratheon's sons. Yet Dorne would only be appeased if their blood was upon the throne. "Do it," Ned hissed through clenched teeth. Both men turned to face him abruptly. Renly's face betrayed his shock and Oberyn's smile spoke of bloodshed. Gather your men and take the queen and her children into custody. He wanted to vomit. Everything about this decision seemed wrong. Once you have them secured, I shall convene the council to hear your brother's words and discuss the matter of the succession. Ned looked upon Renly, a reflection of his brother Robert so long ago, and was filled with cold fury. Pray that your brother can forgive this dishonor we do to him upon his deathbed. Renly's lips twitched, though with what emotion Ned did not know or care. My brother cared little for anyone save himself, in life or in death. But I thank you for your decision. They parted a moment later. Rowan went to seek out his allies, and gather them to seize the queen and her children. Prince Oberyn walked with Ned, though they remained quiet until arriving at the Tower of the Hand. Once Ned and Oberyn were alone in the solar, Ned sank wearily onto the plush chair behind the desk. His leg was throbbing and his heart was hollow. He prayed that his children were safe wherever they were. He prayed that the gods would forgive his betrayals. My men will assist Lord Renly, Oberyn was saying, though his words scarcely registered to Ned's distressed mind. But to what end? Ned ran his hands along his face and through his hair. Only the gods know. If you want to avenge your sister, this is the time. When the small council convenes, they will know all that I know. All doubt was evident in the prince's voice. The unspoken question was clear to Ned. Did he mean to reveal the truth about Jon? Not that. He had promised Lyanna to keep Jon safe. Jon would only be safe if he remained the bastard son of the Lord of Winterfell and Ashara Dayne. Jon of House Targaryen, the son of Prince Rhaegar Targaryen and Lyanna Stark, could never exist. They will learn the truth of Cersei Lannister and her children. They will know that the Kingslayer attempted to murder my son, and that their actions led to the hostilities in the Riverlands. Do we have enough support to hold the city against the Queen, against her father? I will send for Lord Beerlish. He wields considerable sway over the gold cloaks. If we are to hold the city, then we need more swords. Ned slammed his hand onto the desk, causing one of the inkwells to tip and spill. He hissed a curse. Would that I had never come to this place. Oberin watched in silence for a few brief moments, and then smiled. I was wrong to tell Ashara that you were a boring man. Then in somber tones he added, I will send a man for Lord Baelish, and then rouse my men. He bowed politely, and then swept from the room. Eddard Stark was now alone with his thoughts, and truly there was no more frightful place for him at that moment. He wished for a godswood, a true godswood, with a weirwood heart tree, yet would the gods give him solace? Was he still a good man? Was he still an honorable man? His best friend, his third brother, would die before a day passed. Yet even as his friend lay dying, the legacy of Robert Baratheon was being destroyed. Ned had promised Robert to watch over his children, and Ned would do that. Once there was peace, Ned would ensure that Robert's bastards were well kept. Peace? What price would peace cost? This time, how many children would be murdered? How many children would be orphaned? He hated Lyanna and Rhaegar in that moment. He hated his brother Brandon. He hated the Mad King and the Kingslayer. He hated Robert and Cersei. Most of all, he hated himself for making decisions which seemed to never have a good ending. The ache of loss threatened to overwhelm him. He wanted to go home. He wanted Winterfell. He wanted Catelyn in his arms. He wanted his children around him, all of his children. He wanted to see them laugh and play together. Only the gods knew if he would ever see his family again. Sometime later, Cain and Desmond arrived with Littlefinger between them. From his attire, it seemed as though he had already been about for the day when Ned's men had found him. Were Ned less exhausted, such a thing might have seemed curious to him. Lord Patter seated himself across from Ned, a smirk upon his lips. The Whisperers in the Red Keep are telling fascinating tales tonight. I suppose that congratulations are in order. The king lies wounded and near to death. Ned's reply was cold and harsh. This was not a moment for levity. I know, and I know that Robert named you protector of the realm. And how is it that you know that, my lord? Varys hinted as much, and you have just confirmed it. Ned swore. He was so sick of games, and yet, if Littlefinger did not know of the plan which had been devised to detain the queen and her children, then perhaps some secrets were still kept for the moment. Weighing his options, Ned decided to have some trust in this man whom his wife considered as a little brother. He told Pettier the truth about the bastardy of the queen's children. Littlefinger's response showed that he was not at all shocked by the news. So with no legitimate heirs, the path of succession becomes quite tenuous, does it not? Ned tensed his jaw. By rights, the succession should pass to Stannis. Should. Pettier stretched the word out, allowing the syllables to seem ponderous. However, Stannis cannot take the throne without help. Ned was well aware of that fact. He was also well aware that Stannis sitting upon the throne would not appease Dorne. And if Dorne were not appeased, had he sent his children into a prison, would Prince Doran Martell hold his children as hostages to ensure that Dorne's vengeance was complete. Treason, every possible move was treason. Usurping the throne as his friend lay dying, what had he become? Is that why you have asked me here, Lord Stark, for assistance? You promised Catelyn that you would help me. The man's eyes narrowed, as they had upon their first meeting. Ned did not like Lord Baelish's frosty and almost possessive nature toward Catelyn. Ned's mistakes regarding his wife were his to bear. It was not another man's duty to protect his wife, no matter what mistakes he had made. His smile seemed bitter. And I shall, Lord Stark. First, I will tell you that Stannis Baratheon is not the right man for the Iron Throne. He is no man's friend. Even his brothers find him distasteful. He is hard and unyielding. Seating him upon the throne would spell death for Cersei and her bastards, and arouse the anger of Lord Tywin. He spoke of the men and houses who would not side with Stannis Baratheon as king, men who had sided with the Targaryens during Robert's rebellion, or Balon Greyjoy in his rebellion. He also spoke of the benefits Ned could have by marrying his own children to the queen's bastards. Yet Ned knew that he could not and would not marry his children to the Lannister bastards, unless... You can control Joffrey, Lord Baxley was saying. He is but a boy, and controlling him should allow us time to dispose of any unwanted issues. Then, should he prove troublesome, we can reveal his little secret and put Lord Renly upon the throne. Renly upon the throne? It might work. Could work. Renly Baratheon was well loved, and were he to be placed upon the throne, many would support him. He was unwed, and so was the heiress of Dorne. A marriage which would appease the Dornish. A match which would keep his children safe. I will not wed my children to the Lannisters. I will not seek to put my children in harm's way or upon this bloody throne. What you suggest is treason. What I am doing now, as we speak, is treason. Dorne will not stand for the bastard sitting upon the throne. You informed the Viper of the truth? Littlefinger released a scoffing laugh. Then he sighed. I suppose that the Taggers will not wish to see Joffrey upon the throne either. Seeing the question in Ned's eyes, he produced an unsealed parchment and laid it upon the desk, though he did not remove his hand. With the good Maester Pycelle occupied with the king, the ravens are quite free to deliver letters. This arrived earlier this evening and was discovered by an associate of mine. I presume that the Maester was intending to inform the queen in the morning, long before telling you. The mountain is dead, from the men you sent to bring him to justice. Lorzier's Tabor struck the killing blow, but he himself was killed in the process. Lord Tabor will find it difficult to placate the anger of the Tabors now that their son lies dead. Now then, whom would you suggest that we place upon the Iron Throne? Ned clenched his fists beneath the desk. There were no words to describe how vile he felt. It was your suggestion, Lord Baxley. We place Renly Baratheon upon the throne. Peter Baxley smiled, truly smiled, at Ned's words. Renly would be supported by myself, the Stormlands, and likely the Martells, Tyrells, Riverlands, and Vale. An alliance which not even Tywin Lannister could possibly withstand, provided that every house falls into line behind Renly. King's Landing must be secured first and foremost. For that you would need many swords. Littlefinger's smile grew impossibly wide. And to guarantee so many swords, you have come to the man who pays the most swords in the city. Tell me, Lord Stark, do you already have some plan in action? What should a man do when he is trapped between honor and dishonor? When trapped between truth and lies? Brandon had impulsively chosen to defend Lyanna without a second thought. Rudyr had thrown away honor, duty, and marriage for a mere girl, and the realm had bled. What was Ned when compared to his own brother and sister? Would his choices now make the realm bleed as theirs had done so many years before? At this very moment, the Queen and her children are being secured. I intend to call the council together so that the succession can be discussed. I know, however, that you are a man who has a price. What price would it take to secure the gold cloaks to this cause? Oh, for them, a few thousand gold, a small price to avoid losing our heads. And for you? I am certain that Lord Renly will give me anything of my choosing once he is given a throne. Don't you agree? Ned bowed his head low in agreement and disgust. Then I will be on my way. Lord Stark. The man stood, bowed, and departed the room. When he was alone, Ned cradled his head in his hands and wept. Gods forgive me, he whispered into the quiet of his chamber. King Robert Baratheon, first of his name, was dead by the time they convened within the Tower of the Hand. Morning had just barely broken, gray and dull. The birds were singing beyond the walls of the tower, but their tones seemed joyless. The men arrived one by one in various states of dress and attire. Prince Oberyn Martell's clothes were bloodied. Lord Renly Baratheon's clothes were slightly torn, and his cheek was bruised. Lord Petyr Baelish arrived with Jainsley Slent, the commander of the City Watch, both seeming fresh and clean compared to the first two men. Viserys slipped into the room silently, as he was always wont to do. His face seemed as ominous as ever. Grandmaster Pycelle and Sir Barristan Selmy arrived a while after the other men. Neither appeared to have slept much during the night, and their faces were lined with age and exhaustion. Eddard Stark wearily requested that all of the men be seated, to which they all complied. "Is it done?" Ned asked Renly and Oberyn before addressing the rest of the council. Rudyr gave a terse nod of the head. "They are unharmed and under guard," Oberyn replied. "Whom, may I ask, is unharmed and under guard?" The question came from Sir Barristan, who had probably noted the state of Renly and Oberyn's attire. With them he had paused, the words catching in his throat. He breathed deeply before continuing. "With the passing of King Robert, it is necessary for us to discuss the succession of the crown." He proceeded to read the writ of succession, and explain the truth of Cersei Lannister's children. The only men who seemed surprised by the revelation were Sir Barristan and Jaime. Paxel protested vehemently that such an accusation was spurious. It took several minutes of loud discussion and debate for the room to fall quiet again. I heard it from Lady Cersei herself. Ned's voice was calm and level. The persons who are under guard are the former queen and her children. Regarding this matter, it would be judicious to hold a trial. For the moment, I believe that we all wish to know more about their dispositions. Tommen and Myrcella are sequestered together, Renly replied quietly. They are with one of their nursemaids and guarded by some of my personal guard. They only know that my brother was wounded. They know nothing more. Prince Oberin replied next. Cersei and her son Joffrey are held by my men. Ned regarded the Viper doubtfully. Why is there blood on your clothing? I had a minor dispute with one of the former queen's men. He is dead now, as are several more of her personal guards. Ned swore under his breath, and he noticed that he was not alone in his distress. Poartzel protested the actions of the men. Oberyn eyed the maester as though he were deciding how best to stick him with a sword. Ser Barristan remained quiet and unreadable. Eventually, the discussion of whom the next king should be arose. Ned bitterly recalled that he had been in such a discussion before, when his friend Robert was crowned. He allowed Littlefinger to make the suggestion in favor of Lord Renly, though it was a long time in coming. Bechley, Varys, and Renly discussed. Paisel protested. Ned spoke little, though he offered his support in favor of Lord Renly. Oberyn Martell observed the proceedings carefully, with narrowed eyes. Eventually, he too suggested that Dorne might support Renly, though there would need to be some considerations. The other two men simply observed, Barristan stoically and Jaime appearing as though he were a fish out of water. By midday, the decision was made to crown Renly Baratheon as King of Westeros. Letters were sent to the kingdoms of Westeros, declaring the death of King Robert, the bastardization of the children of the former Queen Cersei, and the ascension of Renly as the new king. The remainder of the day was spent subduing the city, writing letters and affirming the positions of the council. Sir Barristan Selmy was requested to retain his position, to which he requested and was permitted a day to consider his future. Grand Maester Pyxell was detained as a prisoner, removed from his position, and deemed untrustworthy. Lord Varys was retained as Master of Whisperers, seemingly unaffected by the change in authority. Lord Varys was pleased to retain his position and to be granted his price. His demand was rather simple, a greater lordship and a high-born wife, once peace was re-established, to which Renly readily agreed. Nada, though he had no greater wish than to return home, was retained in his position due to his assistance with Renly's ascension. Prince Oberyn was granted a position on the council as well, for the same reasons. Securing the city was a bloody job. Over 300 men who claimed loyalty to Cersei Lannister died within the Red Keep and King's Landing that day. Among the dead were Sir Sandrine Trant of the King's Guard and Sandor Clegane. More than 100 other men were killed in the fighting that day, including 2 of Prince Oberyn's guards, who died in subduing Clegane. A matter of alliances was among the first order of duties after the city was secured. Ned wrote to his retainers in the Stormlands, calling them to arms in his support. Ned wrote to Winterfell, calling his men to support the Riverlands first, as Lannister forces had been reported as fighting Tully men in the Riverlands. Once the Riverlands were supported, the northern forces would be able to assist in the south. He also wrote to his wife's family, stating that the North would support the Riverlands as kinsmen and hoped that they would bend to Renly as king. He wrote similarly to Lysa Arryn in the Vale. When Ned was alone with Oberyn and Renly, he spoke with them at length about the need for a southern alliance. An alliance bound in marriage to keep the strength of the South united, as had been done during Robert's rebellion with House of Stark, Tully, and Arryn. Renly seemed reluctant to discuss the idea of marriage, but he also seemed to understand the importance. Letters were sent to Prince Doran Martell and Lord Mace Tyrell requesting not only their allegiance, but a marriage pact. Ned did not doubt that the Martells would wish to see Arianne upon the throne in place of her kin, who had been murdered by the Lannisters. He also did not doubt that the ever-ambitious Tyrells would wish for their daughter Margaery to be crowned as the queen. The details were not Ned's concern, though he doubted there would be peace if the Tyrells chose to join Lord Tyrells over King Renly. The goal would be to wed Baratheon, Martell, and Tyrell, in whatever way the lords so decided. Meanwhile, in the north, Robb Stark, acting as Lord of Winterfell in his father's stead, had already begun to call his bannermen to arms. Lady Catelyn Stark had sent a letter to Winterfell from the Vale requesting that the North aid River run against Lannister aggression. As a son of the North and the Riverlands, Robb knew that his duty was to support his family in the South. The Northern armies would begin their march south a fortnight after receiving Lord Stark's letters regarding Renly Baratheon's ascension to the throne. The gray-black walls of Blackhaven rose in the distance after nearly 3 weeks of riding. Were it not for the knowledge that they had essentially fled the capital, returning to a familiar place would have been a welcome respite. To make matters worse, Jon had never seen girls so miserable as his sisters, and Jane Poole. Alicent was trying her hardest to make the other girls happy, but she was probably the moodiest of them all. He felt badly for Elias. She had spent the least amount of time with their father, even though she had wanted to see him so strongly. Yet she had done her duty in gathering everything the girls would need for their journey. She had not complained, not even when Prince Oberin had told them that their father had commanded them south, along with their half-sisters. Arthur had complained, but he had enjoyed the busyness of the capital and had little desire to return south. Even Jon had enjoyed King's Landing. He had spent a great amount of time speaking with Lord Renly Baratheon, Ser Loras Tyrell, and several other knights and minor lords during his stay in the capital. He was thinking of asking his mother if he could learn to be a knight for one of the lords in the Stormlands, or Reach. The closer they drew to Blackhaven, they could see several hundred tents surrounding the castle. Drawing nearer, the banners which flew above the tents could be seen. Houses whose loyalty was to House Dondarrion were encamped by the thousands around the castle. As they passed the soldiers, some of them recognized Lord Dondarrion at the head of their small group, and cheered. The gates were open to their approach. Inside the walls, they were warmly greeted by Ryland Dondarrion, Lord Beric's younger brother. Yet, while his greeting was kind, the younger Dondarrion appeared to be anxious. It was a few short moments after they were within Blackhaven that Lord Beric dismounted from his steed and walked from the group with his brother. The rest of the group was assisted by stewards, grooms, and attendants. Their horses were taken to the stables while their belongings were taken into the castle. Finally, they were all escorted inside to be shown where they would be staying. The children of the group, consisting of Jon, Arthur, Alysanne, Edric, Sansa, Adria, and Jane Poole, were given rooms in the eastern wing of the castle. The rooms were all close to one another, with bedchambers, sitting rooms, and a shared dining hall. Jon was fairly certain that he had stayed in the same set of rooms with his family before, when they had visited Blackhaven with Aunt Alleria. Their shared dining hall was already laid with food and drink, so that they might refresh after their journey. They chose their own bedchambers and went in them to rest, refresh, and change out of their travel clothes before eating. The bedchamber Jon had chosen was airy and spacious. He did not have many clothes with him, having left most everything behind in King's Landing save what he needed most. Not that he had taken much to King's Landing from Starfall to begin with. He and Arthur had taken much of their winnings from the tournament and archery contest with them from King's Landing, but had also left a great amount behind in the safekeeping of the Hand and Red Viper. He stripped out of his dirty clothes, filled a wash basin with the water from a pitcher on the stand in a corner of the room, and used a sponge to clean away the filth of travel. It was a relief to be clean again after days on end of riding in the hot summer sun. He had been able to handle the days of riding well. His half-sister Sansa and her friend Jane had been considerably less pleasant about the days of riding. Neither of his half-sisters had been happy to learn that their father had sent them from the city. They had both been angry and suspicious, even after Lord Beric had shown them their father's letter. Lord Stark had explained that sending them from the city without any word was for their own safety, as King's Landing was growing too dangerous for their presence. Arya had attempted to ride back on 2 separate occasions. After that, she had been forced to ride double. She would ride with Alysanne for a few hours and then with Arthur or Jon. Arya had at least seemed to enjoy the riding. She was also pleased that Syrio Forel had chosen to accompany them as well. She was finally allowed to ride on her own again after a solid week of riding doubled with one of her siblings. Her mood had improved since she had been riding on her own again. She had spent much of her time speaking with Edric, Arthur, Syrio, and Alysanne. Sansa and Jane had not resisted the journey, though both had complained greatly in the beginning. After a week, they had become mostly silent companions in the journey. Jon and Ollys were occasionally able to elicit smiles from the girls, but otherwise there was not much they could do to improve their moods. After washing, Jon found some clean clothes in his travel bags and dressed. It was a pleasant feeling to be clean and in clean clothing again. He left the room so that he might eat. Edric and Arya were already seated at the table, filling their mouths with the piles of food. "Don't make yourself sick, little sister," Jon said with a laugh. She grinned at him. She had not bothered washing or changing out of her travel clothes. "I won't." Edric promised to show me around the castle. Jon seated himself beside her and laughed as he grabbed some of the food for himself. "You should both change and wash before you explore the castle. Instead of a lord and a highborn girl, they might mistake you for serving staff." "Why would we change before we explore?" Arya complained, not hindered by his rebuke. "All we will have to do is change again when we return, and I don't have many clothes." Edric nodded in agreement with Arya. "Besides which, they know me here as the Lord of Starfall." "Aye, they do, Lord Dayne," Jon replied with a laugh. "I was only teasing. What do you want to show my little sister?" "The gallery and the storm tower, so that she can see the mountains of Dorne." "Are the mountains in Dorne really red?" "They are," Jon replied, a bit wistful at the thought of home. She pursed her lips together, pondering. "Why?" Edric looked at her, as though she had asked the strangest question ever uttered. Jon merely shrugged. "I do not know. Perhaps the maesters do." Edric and Arya smiled at one another conspiratorially. "We should go see Maester Wyman when we are done eating," he suggested. She pushed away from the table, a crust of bread still in her hand. "I'm done." All three of them laughed. Edric grabbed a roll, drained his glass of water, and stood. He then led the rather impatient Arya from the room. Arthur emerged from his room not too long after their departure. He joined Jon at the table, and also helped himself to the food. They spoke as they ate. When he was finished, Arthur informed him that he was going to rest for an hour or so. Jon was glad of that, for he had decided that he wanted time alone in the castle gardens to think and reflect. The gardens within the castle walls were watered from springs within the castle. From the springs, canals and channels had been made to direct the water into the castle and through the gardens. It was a peaceful, quiet place, where the herbs grew sweet and the birds nested in the trees. Jon seated himself beneath a cedar tree and breathed in the cool air of the gardens. He thought back to King's Landing, to Prince Oberin's last words to him. The prince's commands had been straightforward and simple, until his last request to Jon alone. "When you see my brother, tell him that it is time. He will understand what I mean. Now go, take your sisters to safety in Dorne." Jon had no idea what Prince Oberin could have meant by "it is time," but he would do his duty, as was expected of him. He also thought upon their sudden departure from King's Landing. What had their father been doing that caused him to send them all south? Was whatever he had done the reason for all of the bannermen who were encamped outside of Blackhaven? If it had just been Jon and his brother and sister, he would have assumed that their father no longer wanted them around. Yet they had all been sent at the same time from King's Landing with Lord Beric and his men as escorts. Not that Jon thought his father capable of sending away his children for no reason. In the time they had spent together, Lord Stark had always been available to speak with each of his children. He had asked Jon about his interests, goals, and plans for the future. Jon had answered his father truthfully. He had not put much thought into his future. Jon knew that in a few years Edric would be an adult and receive all of his rights as Lord of Starfall, and he could remove Jon and his siblings from Starfall if he so chose. Not that Edric would ever do such a thing, but it was within his rights. Jon knew that House Martell would welcome him into their service. He knew that he wanted to be a knight, but beyond that he had not thought much upon the future. Well, other than Taya, he had thought about the future he could have with her. He had thought of marrying her, of raising a family with her, yet he had no idea what she truly wanted. Did she still want him? Or had her interests moved on to someone else? He hoped that she still wanted him. He wanted to see her again, to kiss her, to tell her that being apart hurt worse than anything else in the world. Did any of that truly matter? Even if she did love him, they were just bastards. He had no lands or titles and would have none unless they were granted to him by a lord such as his father or her uncle. He could earn titles and glory as a knight. He could be worth of her hand. In the midst of his reverie, Taxley, one of the maids, approached him. She was around 17 years of age. A lovely girl who was in service to Seren Dondarrion, the younger sister of Beric and Rylan. He had spoken with her on several visits between Illyria and Beric. She was pretty, and at times Jon thought she knew how lovely she was to look upon. Yet her beauty could not compare to the one he loved. "Hello, Jon. Lord Beric wants to speak with you. It seems quite urgent." He stood quickly, knowing that Lord Beric would probably be telling them why the soldiers were at the castle. At least that was his assumption. "Thank you. Shall I go to Lord Beric's solar?" "Aye, the larger one near the library." "Thank you, Tale." With that, he bowed his head to acknowledge her words and walked away. The walk to the solar was not terribly far, and he knew the halls relatively well. When he arrived, Alizanne, Arthur, Edric, Lord Beric, Lord Rylan, and Lady Surin were all present. He wondered why they were gathering, but he learned nothing until his half-sisters arrived as well. "I know that we have just arrived," Lord Beric began. "However, letters arrived here during our journey south, which will require our immediate attention. It seems that, since our departure from King's Landing, that King Robert Baratheon died due to wounds which he sustained during his hunt." Jon heard Sansa and Lady Surin gasp. That King Robert had died so suddenly truly was a shock. He listened as Lord Beric continued. "It seems that upon the king's death that a coup was staged." To that, Arthur, Jon, and Arya all tried to speak at once, but were silenced by Lord Beric. "The coup ousted the former Queen Cersei and her children. They have been decried as bastards born of incest between the Lady Cersei and her twin brother Sir Jaime Lannister, the Kingslayer." Arya muttered something under her breath, at which Sansa looked both nauseous and offended. Their quiet bickering was silenced as they learned more. "Lord Rensley Baratheon has been declared King of the Seven Kingdoms. He has the support of your father, Lord Eddard of House Stark, Prince Doran of House Martell, and Lord Mace of House Tyrell. King Rensley has also called his bannermen to arms, and all of his lords are to send forces to support him in King's Landing." "Did father really support Lord Renly?" Sansa questioned. Lord Beric bowed his head affirmatively. "His seal and signature are affixed to the decree of succession, Lady Sansa." Alizanne gazed at Lord Beric, puzzled. "Isn't Lord, or rather King, Renly III's son?" "What of Lord Stannis Baratheon?" He sighed. "There is no mention of Lord Stancy. Though I can tell you that he is a wearisome man, and would make a terrible king. Oh, he would be a better ruler than King Robert was. But in the end someone would slit his throat in his sleep for being so harsh and unbending. Rosie is a good man, and will be a good king if we can keep the throne in his favor." There was silence in the room as the children stared at Lord Beric with wide eyes and open mouths. It was seldom that a person was so blunt before them, especially regarding such weighty concerns. "House Dondarrion is sword to Storm's End, and by virtue of that fact, to King Renly. It is our solemn duty to support and defend our liege lord. As such, I shall be sending our forces to King's Landing. Rylan will be departing from Blackhaven with our assembled bannermen 2 days hence. I shall be departing at the same time with some of my men to meet with the Dornish and Reach forces, which are assembling at Nightsong. I will be leading the swords from Starfall after I wed Lady Alyria at Nightsong. After we are wed, she will come here to be established as the Lady of Blackhaven. The Lady Ashara and Lucas will be arriving with her." He paused for a moment, allowing the children to absorb everything that he had told them. "As for the rest of you, Jon, you will be departing on the morrow. Prince Doran and Prince Oberin have both sent letters requiring your presence at Sunspear. You will be traveling to Weil, where you will take a ship to Sunspear. Illegitimate, you have been appointed as the guardian for your half-sisters. You, the Lady Sansa, and Arya, as well as any other guests, have been invited to stay at the Water Gardens until all hostilities have ceased. You are also welcome to remain here until your lady mother, brother, and aunt arrive. I would give you leave to remain here, however. I believe that the invitation to the Water Gardens should not be turned down. It would be prudent for all of you to write to your parents regarding your health and safety now that you are here. I would, however, discourage you from mentioning where you are, as we are at war, and ravens can quite easily be intercepted." He did not say much more, though he did answer their questions and allow each of them to read the letters that he had received. The swiftness of their departure from King's Landing now made sense, however. It did not explain all of the questions which had filled Jon's head, nor did it explain why he was needed in Sunspear. Yet he would go as he was commanded, for that was his duty. He also hoped that maybe he could see Tainy again when he reached the capital of Dorne. Jon departed from Blackhaven the following day. with an escort of 10 men. Parting had been difficult. He knew that, with the coming war, he might not see them again. Arthur and Edric were going to be riding with Lord Beric into battle. Jon assumed that he too would join the armies at King's Landing. He might have been young, but he was not so foolish as to believe that he could not die in battle, so they had hugged and kissed in parting, his siblings and cousin whom he had known for his entire life, and his half-sisters whom he had known for mere months. His brother, cousin, and the army of House Dondarrion would depart the following day. His sisters would remain at Blackhaven awaiting the arrival of his mother and youngest brother before they departed for the Water Gardens. They would be safe, he believed, and he did pray that someday they might all be united again. Waiting was an unbearable task. Waiting in the castle where Loya and her babes had been murdered was maddening. Oberyn Martell knew that patience was important, had everyone not told him that since he was a boy. Now, as he awaited word of King Renly Baratheon's decision, he was as patient as he could muster. Doran's letters had been firm. Arianne was to be queen. Nothing less was acceptable. He also suggested that Jon should be wed to one of Oberin's daughters. To anyone else, the suggestion would have seemed a passing thought, but Oberin understood the greater implication. To control the last of House Targaryen in favor of House Martell, Jon would have to wed one of Oberin's daughters. Granted, the children of the Mad King were still somewhere in the world, but there was always a chance that they too were mad. Having watched Jon from his infancy, Doran and Oberyn had every faith in his sanity and reasoning. In King's Landing, hours and days had been spent deliberating the possibilities for the future of Westeros. Getting the support of some of the kingdoms had not been difficult. With Renly had come the loyalty of the Stormlands. With Oberyn's presence, Prince Doran's support had been a simple task to ensure. With Lord Stark's support had come the North. Through Lord Stark's marriage had come ties to the Vale and Riverlands. From Lady Arryn, there had been no reply. Several Vale lords had not decided to await the lady's wishes, and had begun to swear allegiance by Raven. Lord Royce was among the lords who had assisted in the coup, and he had sent word to Runestone that their men should come to support their king. Lord Edmure Tully had responded to the change of sovereignty with a terse reply that he would kneel before the king who could get the bloody lions out of the Riverlands. Edmure's response had made Renly laugh, a welcome change from the somberness which had shrouded the new king since the day of his ascension. Not that his demeanor was unexpected. With a dead brother, a dead lover, and an impending war with the Lannisters, the newly appointed king certainly had enough reasons to be somber. The Tyrells had granted their support by way of letter and the arrival of Garland Tyrell, second son of Lord Mace Tyrell. He was sent to negotiate the desires of his house on behalf of his father, who was gathering the armies of the Reach for their march to King's Landing. The desires of House Tyrell were quite obvious, at least to a man like Oberyn. They wanted the crown for their daughter, a plan which conflicted with a very similar desire in House Martell. Such matters were what the king was now deliberating. Marriage, for a man such as him. The matter would be one of politics, and little else. While the Tyrells were richer in lands and resources, they had not been there to seat Renly upon the throne. The discussion had been long and drawn out between the king, Lord Stark, Set Garland, Lord Varys, and Oberyn himself. They were all in agreement that a marriage alliance would be the best way to cement the bonds between the southern kingdoms. Toril had pushed for his sister to be Renly's bride, yet Oberyn had been quick to remind them all that it was Elia Martell whose children should have sat upon the Iron Throne. Her niece would be a just choice for queen. The Lady Margaery would be a fair bride for Prince Quentyn. Such an arrangement would create strong ties between all three kingdoms. If Margaery were to wed Quentyn and Arianne were to wed Renly, their offspring would be royal cousins. Throughout all of the discussions, the king had remained quiet. He had listened intently to all of their arguments. Eventually, he had dismissed everyone so that he could weigh his options alone. So Oberyn waited, stalking the halls and courtyards of the Red Keep, while the king pondered the future. The future? Such an uncertain thing. The future. He did not often like to think upon it. War was a certainty with the Lannisters. Already, their forces were reported as having split into two masses. One force remained in the Riverlands, under the command of Sir Jaime Lannister. The second force was on its way south, under the command of Lord Tywin Lannister. The lords of the Stormlands and Reach were already amassing in and around King's Landing. Hopefully enough men-at-arms would arrive by the time Lord Tywin's forces arrived at King's Landing. Tarn would send its naval forces in support soon. though they did have concerns about Lord Stannis Baratheon on Dragonstone. Lord Stannis had denounced his brother's ascension to the throne. Renly had replied to his brother, declaring that the will of the people had made him king as it had for Robert. They had not yet received a response. Lord Varys found him as he walked along the outer battlements of the Red Keep. He remembered the first time he had walked there. Aelia had been Rhaegar's wife for less than half a year, and she was not yet accustomed to her life as future queen. It was upon this wall where she had told him that she was with child. She had been so happy, and he had shared in her joy. His sweet sister, "May we talk?" Varys asked as he approached. "If you wish," Oberin replied with a sigh. He approached and spoke in a low, hushed tone. Not that his voice could have been heard over the wind which gusted strongly across the wall. "I know that your desire is to place Princess Arianne upon the throne, but what if Renly should choose Lady Margaery instead? Then Arianne shall be wed to Lord Willis Tyrell. Was that not the general consensus?" A thin smile. "It was, however. I know that is not the desire of your house." He turned to face the man, his back pressed against the wall. "I desire many things which are impossible. Nothing will restore my sister and her children to me. The mountain is dead, yet two still remain. It was you who told my brother and I that Amory Lorch was responsible for the murder of Rhaenys. It was Tywin Lannister who was responsible for both of those monsters. With their heads laid at my feet, at my brother's feet, shall our blood debt be repaid." He bowed his head briefly. "Yet it is not only their deaths which we have worked toward. It is also the boy's future which has been worked for." Oberin smiled ever so slightly at the eunuch. "I sent word to my brother that the boy should wed one of my daughters, a bastard for a bastard. Even if his birth should come to light, his legitimacy is impossible to prove or disprove. His blood is enough for some to rally behind." Who would rally behind a dragon's bastard? "Lord Stark has given his blessing on a match between the boy and one of my girls. I support the match as well. He and my daughter Tyane are quite fond of one another. If she does not want the match, then he can be wed to my daughter, yeah. He laughed bitterly. My sister might have found humor in that. She did have a rather dark humor. Varys sighed heavily, sorrow visible in his visage. "I do recall that, my lord. Yet you could not save her?" he hissed. "No one could save her. Not from Aerys Targaryen, nor Tywin Lannister. Queen Rhea wanted Aelia and her children to go to Dragonstone. If they had then, they would have lived, and we could have watched over them." The man's tone remained calm, even obsequious. "Neither Doran nor I would have allowed their exile." Varys sighed wearily. "I do not doubt that, my lord, yet now is not a time to discuss what might have been, but what can be. Will you choose to tell the boy the truth, and if so, what will be done?" "So few of us know the truth. Lord Vere, Lord Stark, Lord Reed, you, my brother, myself, Lady Ashara, and the nursemaid Willa. The secret can die with us, if it needs to." The spider cocked his head to the side, considering, and what if the boy should have a child who resembled his father? Violet eyes would be easy enough to ignore. His supposed mother has them, but silver hair like his father is much more difficult to explain away. The Danes have Targaryen blood. So do the Martells and Baratheons, but it would be hard to know that from looking upon any in your family or theirs. "You seem rather concerned about the fate of the boy," he replied shortly. "Are you?" came the hasty retort. He breathed deep, in and out. He thought about the boy, about Jon. He had hated him when he had first seen him. A mere babe, and yet he represented a great offense against Yats. Yet Ashara had persuaded him to keep the boy safe. As he watched Jon grow, he had become truly impressed by the boy. He was the quietest of the three eldest desert wolves, a term Ashara had used for her children since their infancy. He had a quick mind and a great deal of talent for weapons and strategy. He was not as inclined toward business and numbers as Yaxlan was, nor was he as reckless as Arthur. Jon had been a pleasure to train, mold, and help raise. He was actually quite fond of the idea that the boy could be his son by marriage. "I have raised him as I would a son. His fate is of great concern to me, which is why I am having him wed one of my daughters. Then it would also be wise of you and Lord Stark to tell him the truth now. He is young enough to see how dangerous a coup is, how important support is. He may come to forgive the secrecy and lies of his birth if he learns them now. If he learns that he has been kept safe by the lies. Perhaps he may even gain the good graces of King Renly and ask for the Targaryens to return from exile." "Why would Renly ever allow them to return?" As a matter of goodwill, if he is the king we hope for him to be, then he will be able to restore balance to this country. Part of that balance could be in allowing 2 exiled children a place to call home. Then they could be wed to whomever he chose, and watched as he pleases. Oberin regarded the man curiously. Why did the Targaryens matter so much to the man? It is a matter to consider, yet for the moment there are greater concerns than the return of 2 exiles. He did not seem pleased by the response, but he acquiesced instead of pressing the matter. Indeed, I shall leave you to your walk, Prince Oberin. He watched the eunuch shuffle away, curious as to what schemes were forming in the man's head. Why would he want the Targaryen children to return? Though the spider's whispers had always been of help, he had hardly been pushing for the Targaryen restoration. He too had bid for patience, for caution. Jon could never learn the truth. The Targaryens could never be restored and would likely never be returned. With a sigh, he turned to watch the gulls flying in the bay. He thought of Ylya and her children. He thought of Lyanna Stark and her son. He thought of the man who had fathered both of their children. The Silver Prince, whose passions had torn the kingdom apart. A man whose father had burned lords to death within the halls of the Red Keep. He closed his eyes and in a moment could see the crown of blue roses fall onto Lyanna Stark's lap. He could see Ylya's cold sorrow at the loss of her husband's love. He could see the young man who was the result of so many wrongs. Jon was a good boy. He did not doubt the boy's courage, intellect, or tenacity. Yet the throne was not for him. The throne was never to have been for him. The throne should have been Aegon's. The throne should have belonged to the blood of House Martell. Perhaps soon that particular wrong would be righted. Given the right circumstances and at the right time, perhaps Jon could be told the truth of his parentage, but not now. There was no support for House Targaryen. Now, should the need ever arise for him to be told the truth, he should first be wed to a Martell so that he could bring no further offense against Aesias. The betrothal pact between Arianne and Jon could be destroyed without a soul ever knowing of its existence. It was hours later when King Renly assembled his counselors together again. He had made his decision. In the name of justice, and as a reward for the assistance in his ascension, he would wed Princess Arianne Martell. He had drafted a formal decree for the marriage contract, as well as a second contract between House Tyrell and Martell for a betrothal between the Lady Marguerite Tyrell and Prince Quentyn Martell. The 2 betrothal contracts were signed by all counselors who were present. Given the fact that a hostile army was heading to King's Landing, both marriages would take place after the Lannister armies were subdued. It was a victory for House Martell. Princess Arianne would become Queen of Westeros. The only obstacle was the Lannisters. Though Oberin could not see how Lord Tywin expected to win a fight when so outnumbered, so he would wait until the armies arrived. With a smile on his lips, he realized that he could wait for war. He could wait a few more short months to see Taxley Lannister dead. The journey by sea to Sunspear was far swifter than by land. Jon had made the journey more than once from Starfall, and had always enjoyed the journey. Arthur was the only one in the family who preferred to make the journey by land, as sea travel churned his stomach. Jon found that there was a certain peace which he could draw from the seas that was more difficult to find on land. The journey took less than a week from Weil. The winds were strong and the weather fair as they sailed the Sea of Dorne around the Broken Arm and finally to Sunspear. He loved Sunspear. He loved the mud brick walls of the Shadow City. He loved the smell of spice in the air. He loved the towers of the old palace. So different was Sunspear from Starfall, Old Town, or King's Landing. But it was wonderfully different. Upon arriving at the palace, he met with the steward. The steward escorted him to Ser Manfrey Martell, and Ser Manfrey escorted him to Prince Doran's private solar. Prince Doran was seated in his rolling chair, gazing out of a window when Jon arrived. Aro Hata was standing close to the door, a quiet and imposing presence, who guarded over the ruler of Doran. When he was inside the room, Jon walked to his prince and knelt before him. "My lord." "Jon, it is good to see you again." The Prince of Dorne's voice was soft and weary. He indicated for Jon to be seated, so he rose and seated himself upon a bench near Dorne. "How was your journey?" Jon laughed. "It was long, my lord. However, there were no difficulties along the way." Doran nodded his head slowly. His words came even slower. "That is good to hear. Tell me, what was the last news you had of King's Landing?" "King Robert has died, and Renly Baratheon is now king. Lord Donavarian allowed us to read the decrees which had come forth from the king. my father, and Prince Oberin. I left Blackhaven a day after we arrived, so that I could respond to your summons." He paused, anxious to know if Prince Oberin's words would truly make sense. "Before leaving King's Landing, Prince Oberin told me that I must tell you it is time. He said that you would understand what it meant." Doran Martell's expression darkened. "I do understand." Anger tinged his voice. However, he was wrong. Now is not the time. He sighed deeply, his head hanging low, for a moment before he looked at Jon with a much more peaceful expression. It is no matter now, for the issue to which he was referring is irrelevant at this time. There are, however, other concerns, other ravens which have flown. My daughter shall be queen. Jon felt his jaw go slack. Evidently much had happened since he had left King's Landing. "That is wonderful to hear, my lord." The man's lips pressed tight together. "I am glad that my blood will sit upon the throne as it was meant to, yet I am ever wary of sending those whom I love to that city. When the Lannisters are subdued, my eldest children will go to King's Landing so that alliances may be formed through marriage. Arianne shall be queen, and Quentyn shall wed Margaery Tyrell. He shall become my heir. An alliance such as bound the North Riverlands and Vale." Doran affirmed the question with a nod of his head. It was Lord Stark's suggestion, and all parties have agreed that this arrangement is the most beneficial and just arrangement of alliances. As a way of uniting the North to the crown, a match has been proposed between yourself and one of my nieces. My brother and daughter have both spoken of a fondness between yourself and Tiang. She has been spoken to of this matter, but has declined to make any decisions at this time. Jon's mouth went dry. A match between himself and Tyenn, such a thought was overwhelming. "If it please you and Prince Oberin, as well as Tyenn, I should gladly accept such a proposal." A soft smile lighted across his face. "It does please myself and my brother. It is Ta whom you must convince. Failing her acceptance, you will wed one of my other nieces. As there are no other matches which would be possible at this time due to age or impropriety of birth, it is important to our houses that this match take place. I understand, my lord. I shall do my duty and wed as is desired by my lords and my parents." "Good," he replied with a nod of his head. "There is one further matter before I dismiss you. By week's end, we shall be sending ships with our armies from Sunspear to King's Landing. You, as well as my eldest two nieces, shall be traveling with them to join the armies of the Stormlands and Reach. It will be my honor to serve, my lord. Remember that wars are bloody things. Would that wars could cease." He sighed heavily. "Now go, seek out my niece, that you may resolve the issue of your betrothal." "Of course, my lord." Jon knelt again before the Prince of Dorne and kissed his hand before he left the room. Jon's mind and heart were racing when he left the room. He could wed Tyenn, his beautiful, wonderful sand snake. At least, he could wed her if she chose to marry him. He did not find the idea of wedding one of her sisters quite so appealing. He supposed that he should find Arianne before Tyenn so that he might congratulate the Princess of Dorne for her betrothal. He also thought that it might be a wise idea to learn where his rooms were or to freshen up after such a long journey. But he wanted to find Tyenn. As he sought his beloved's location, his thoughts also turned to the future battles in which he must fight. He knew that Arthur and Edric would be in the fighting as well, under Lord Beric's command. It was only right that Jon, as their elder, should be in the fight as well. The thought also struck him that should he die or Arthur, that they had not even said their farewells to their mother or youngest brother, nor had they said farewell to their father. If they died in battle, their parents would never see them alive again. He shuddered at the thought and pushed it away so that he might find Tyenn. He eventually learned where she was and found Tyenn, reading in one of the large, airy rooms, which overlooked terraced courtyards of the old palace. She was robed in blue silk, which was trimmed with silver. His breath caught when he looked at her, and at the smile which shone on her face when she looked up at him. "Tete," he greeted, his heart in his throat. She looked up from her book, laid it aside, and a smile illumined her face. "I had heard that you were here, my sweet. I have missed you." "I have missed you as well. Have you heard our prince's suggestion?" he asked with some trepidation. Her nose wrinkled ever so slightly. "Suggestion implies that our fathers have not already stated their intended conclusion. I read the letters. My father and yours wish for us to wed. Or should I refuse that you wed my sister Eaya?" He found himself at a loss for words. Did she not want him? He swallowed the lump in his throat. Are you opposed to such a match? The ghost of a smile flickered on her lips. She motioned for him to sit beside her, which he did readily. I am opposed to you marrying my sister, any of my sisters. As for myself, I am upset that my father is forcing this. He has never before cared about whom I or any of my sisters favor, nor has he ever planned a match for any of us. He always told us that we could wed if we chose, but that he would not defend us if we chose poorly, for he had trained us to handle ourselves in such matters. She softened then, raising a hand to his cheek. I am not opposed to you. She pressed her lips softly to his for a brief moment. I am opposed to losing my freedom. He replied fervently and quickly. I would never deny you anything. She laughed. Yes, you would, and with good reason. As we now stand, I can go where I wish, with whomever, for however long, and no one can say anything against it save my father. Should we wed? I doubt that you would allow such a thing. He was at a loss for words. Would you not want to only be with me? She cocked her head to the side, golden strands of her hair strayed across her face. He hated the expression she had. It made him feel incredibly young compared to her. He was younger than her, but hated the reminder. I need to consider the possibilities. She kissed him again, soft and quick. She stood and stepped away, smiling sweetly. I must go to the sept. The sept? To pray for guidance, my sweet. Oh, of course. I was born in a sept. I suppose that makes me closer to the gods in a way. I often find clarity when I am in their presence. Should I not seek them about such matters as marriage? Not waiting for a reply, she bent to him, and pressed her lips to his again before she turned to leave. Her movements were slow and precise as she walked away. Jon was at a loss for what he should be thinking or feeling. His beautiful Tiny, did she want him or not? Would she even give an answer before he left to fight in the impending war? You should give him your answer before he leaves, Arianne Martell murmured gently. They were curled together in Arianne's chambers, the future queen of Westeros and her cousin of the same age, who may as well have been her twin sister for all that they shared. I know, Tiain replied. I just don't know what my answer will be. The poor boy has been waiting for days. It's cruel, sweetling. She giggled. You have at times been far crueler. I am a woman betrothed now, and can do no cruelty toward my betrothed and king. You could, if he tries to harm you, I shall place tears in his wine so that he can never harm you again. Tears? Tears of lice, a poison which has neither taste nor color. When used, it mimics a sickness of the bowels, leading to death. Tie. Arianne gasped, pulling away from her cousin. Tiane's expression was pure and guileless. You have asked me to be one of your companions. I would be remiss if I did not protect you at all times. You are wicked, she smiled, laying back against the bed. I am my father's daughter. Shall you do as your father has bid? Arianne sat so that she was looking down upon her cousin. I will give Jon my decision before he leaves. She laughed at her cousin's doubtful gaze. Truly I will. I can hardly avoid the docks today, as my sisters shall depart for King's Landing with him. Can I know your answer? My dear uncle shall know first, then Jon. Arianne's expression was ponderous. Why is it so difficult for you to choose Jon? He is a good man. He is smart, kind, and brave. His adoration of you is obvious to all. Tiain pressed her lips together, thoughtful. He is so young. That hardly mattered when at first you betted him. Why does it matter now? Betting and wedding are not the same things. To wed is till death. Arianne frowned. Unless you are like my mother and abandon your children to return home. Tyne reached up and squeezed Arianne's arm. Norvis is far away, sweetling. Yet I could not travel so far as that from him. We are both of Doran, and nowhere could we be parted. Long amongst the sands of our home. 'Tis his youth I doubt, not my forbearance. What of his youth makes you wary? The fickleness of young hearts worries me. He loves me now, that much is true. But will he love me a year from now? Will he love me 10 years from now? You are to wed without thought to such matters. I never had such an expectation until recent events. Today is all that matters, sweetling. Tomorrow may never come. For we shall die amid the endless waves. Forever young and forever loved, she quoted with a wistful sigh. 'Tis such a lovely poem, even with the lovers' deaths. Sighing again, Taxley moved away from Arianne and off the bed. Arianne moved to sit upon the edge of the bed. I must decide sooner rather than later. She pressed a kiss to Arianne's brow. I shall see you later. Tyrion left Arianne's room and walked slowly across the length of the palace. What choice should she make? She cared for Jon. They had known one another since she was a child. They had trained together. They had spent many hours talking and laughing. She remembered the first time he had kissed her. They had been walking along the coast near the water gardens, near evening. They had been gathering shells so that the jewelers could fashion them into charms. Their siblings had returned to the common areas of the water gardens instead of joining their walk, leaving them alone. She had fallen during their walk, and he had knelt beside her shortly thereafter to ensure that she was unhurt. She recalled that she had smiled at him and had assured him that she was fine. His response had been sweet. He had expressed his gladness that she was unharmed, and then had brushed stray strands of her hair from her face. Then she did not quite remember how they had started kissing. She leaned against the cool stone walls of Sunspear, confused. She loved his kisses, his touches. He was sweet, eager, gentle, a good fighter, and all that she could possibly wish for in a husband. Why did she resist? Why did she hesitate? With a start, she knew it was not Jon she resisted, though she did doubt the longevity of his love simply due to his youth. The problem wasn't love. The problem wasn't marriage. The problem was her father. She wanted to know why. She understood that alliances were important. Yet what benefits were there to a bastard alliance? If anything, it would be more sensible to betroth one or both of Lord Stark's legitimate daughters to Prince Trystane and Willis Tyrell. What purpose would wedding two bastards provide? Why now? Jon was already of Dorne. If anything, the match was a mere token gesture. Surely if Lord Stark gave a good enough dowry, even Alicent could wed a highborn lord. Tyrion knew that lords chose spouses for their children all the time. Her father had never made such a demand of his girls until now. So why decide that she must wed Jon? And yet, if Jon went to war and died, she ached at the thought of him dying. She could not bear the thought of him going to war without knowing that she cared for him. She continued to her destination, the Sept. She needed one last prayer before she made a firm decision. When she opened the doors of the Sept, she saw him kneeling before the warrior. His head was bowed in solemn prayer. His sword lay upon the feet of the statue. She knew her answer when he turned and noticed her. Have I disrupted your prayers? No, I just finished. He stood. His eyes were a mix of hurt and confusion. I shall pray daily that the seven keep you and protect you during your time away. He gave her a half-smile. Thank you. I suppose that I should leave you to your prayers. He stood, strapping on his sword. He turned from her to leave. She knew that she had to tell him now. Jon, he stopped. I need to talk to you. He turned to her again. She breathed deep. There was no turning back from this moment. Yes, she whispered. Yes? His face displayed nothing but confusion. She stepped closer to him. I have decided to accept the proposal. You! Oh, he was beautiful when he was shocked and happy. His smile shone like the sun. Yes, Jon, I will marry you. He closed the gap between them and, lifting her in the air, kissed her hard. Oh, how she had missed kissing him. The urgent longing which filled his every movement was intoxicating. She could lose herself in the sweet taste of him. She was breathless when he pulled away. I couldn't bear to have you depart without telling you my answer. I was afraid that you would scorn my affection, that you would reject the betrothal. I will never and have never scorned your affection. I find the thought of another calling you husband distasteful, for that shall be my pleasure, and I do not think that I should like to share you. He grinned. You wanted to share me with my sister. She laughed. That was before I was to be wed. He kissed her again, and she felt herself fill with warmth. She pulled away from his lips, but they clung to one another. We should stop, my sweet, she breathed against his skin. I would not want for our first child to be conceived as I was. He cocked his head to the side. As you were, in a sept. He laughed and shook his head. Your father has had some interesting experiences. She smirked. Perhaps you should have him tell you of my mother one day. You should meet her as well. I think she would like you. Where is she? She serves the faith at the Septus house near Golden Grove. I have not seen her for several years, though we write to one another regularly. You must miss one another terribly. She pulled back a little. When we first parted, I was still a babe. It has been difficult at times, but I have grown accustomed to living away from her. Now why don't we go and tell my sweet uncle of our decision? Now? He ran his fingers along her spine. Oh, she knew quite well what he wished for instead of seeing the Prince of Dorne. Yes, my sweet. He needs to know my decision. Reluctantly, he agreed and pulled away from her. Did you not come here to pray? He asked, delaying. With a smile, she kissed his cheek. I did, and upon my arrival, the gods gave me the answer I needed. She found his hand with hers and tugged. Come, my sweet. My uncle awaits a response. She walked toward the door of the septet, and he followed behind her, his fingers laced with her own. Prince Doran Martell readily gave his blessing to Tyenn and Jon's betrothal. She thought it likely that this was by far the swiftest thing her uncle had ever done. They bowed to him, spoke a few words, and were dismissed with his blessing. They passed the remaining hours before the ships were to leave in Jon's chambers. While they did spend time packing his belongings into chests, they spent much of their time abed. In his arms, she realized how much she had missed him. She had forgotten how much she enjoyed his kiss. His touch, she had thought him just a passing interesting, yet she felt that she could enjoy being his wife. She could learn to want him more. Eventually they dressed again, slowly. Perhaps they should have been swifter to dress, but neither was willing to hurry the other. Are you trying to miss the departure of the ships? She teased from the bed. He was searching for a missing boot, to no avail. I'm trying to find all of my belongings wherever you lost them. She giggled. It is hardly my fault that you lost your boot somewhere in here. Your shirt as well. He turned to her and grinned. You are laying upon my shirt. Looking down, he smiled. He took a few paces toward the bed, and bending down, found his boot beneath the bed. He sat upon the bed to put on and lace his boot, but was interrupted by Tyenn wrapping her arms around him and kissing his neck. He shrugged her away, though she could feel his reluctance to do so. If you don't stop that, I will truly miss the ships. And then, what will your father think of allowing us to wed? She pulled away with a soft sigh. I would not want my sisters to think you a craven who flees from war. When he had finished lacing his boot, he turned and leaned down, kissing her hard, and then soft upon the lips. When he pulled away, he pulled his shirt from beneath her. I would not want that either, though I do not relish the prospect of traveling to King's Landing with your sisters. They will do you no harm, I promise. He raised a brow at her, doubtful. Jen, she allowed the word to linger long upon her lips. Truly my sisters will be kind to you. He stood and held a hand out to her so that she would stand. I think they will make my life terribly difficult while we travel together. She giggled and slid from the bed. That is likely. She picked up her gown from the floor and slid it on, pulling the laces tight so that she appeared pure and innocent again. She walked to the vanity and used one of the combs to smooth her hair. She then pulled back her hair and tied it with a blue silk cord. She turned to him, pensive. Are you ready? His smile was shy. As ready as I will ever be. She walked to him and laced her fingers in his. Then we should go to the docks. No doubt one of the stewards has been waiting to take your belongings to the ship. He agreed, and together they walked from the room. Sure enough, a steward and 4 young men were waiting to carry Jon's chest to the docks so that it could be loaded onto the ship. Jon told the men that he was ready for them to take his things to the ships. They walked to the docks hand in hand. She knew that he was anxious by the way he gripped her hand. She did nothing to pull away from him. Though she had been raised to fight and defend herself and her loved ones, it had almost always been a theory. Other than a few drunken brawlers at the taverns in various cities, their lives had never been endangered. Today she would send people whom she loved to war. The docks were already teeming with men and women when they arrived. Prince Doran and Princess Arianne were seated upon a raised platform, guarded by Ariohita and other swordsmen. Oberin and Nymeria were standing on the platform, laughing with Arianne. Dayne felt Jon grip her hand tighter as they approached the platform. She did not envy his impending journey with her sisters. Arianne beamed when she laid her eyes upon Tyenn and Jon. Father informed me of your decision, Arianne said in greeting as the guards allowed them to pass onto the platform. It seems you were too busy after that decision was made to tell myself or your sisters. Jaime and Jon dipped to their knees briefly to Doran before replying to Arianne. It was my duty to farewell my betrothed before he departs for war. She smiled innocently at her cousin and spared a brief glance at Jon, whose cheeks were tinged pink. He was handsome in his travel attire, with his hair pulled back and tied at the nape of his neck. Oberin, Nymeria, and Arianne laughed. I trust that you will long remember your parting, cousin. Tyenn giggled as she watched the flush of red spread down Jon's neck. She did not doubt that he would remember her farewell. Her body still ached from their lovemaking, and likely would for most of the next day. Doran interrupted their repartee with a gentle cough. I am certain that the two of you will have much time to discuss the matter later. For now we must bid farewell to our soldiers, as well as these three who are so dear to us. In agreement, Tyenn released Jon's hand, and stood beside Arianne, while Jon, Obara, and Nymeria knelt before Doran and Arianne. The three of you will go to war today. You will join my brother Oberin and the forces of the south to fight against the Lannisters. They have long been our enemies, and the time has come to seek our vengeance. Fight well, my brother's daughters. Fight well, Jon. May the winds be strong and the seas fair for your journey. Go with my blessing, Doran charged them. Fight for Doran. Fight for House Martell, unbowed, unbent, unbroken. Unbowed, unbent, unbroken, Obara and Nymeria echoed in one voice, uttering the words of House Martell. While I breathe, I hope, Jon said, claiming the words of House Dayne. The three then stood. Obara and Nymeria kissed Doran, then Arianne, and then Tyenn in parting. May your journey be swift and your sword at the ready, Arianne told Obara and Nymeria. They will sing songs of our victory at your wedding feast, my sister and queen. Obara replied, We will be there to see you, Nymeria told Arianne and Tyenn. I shall look forward to seeing you both upon your victory, my sisters, Tyenn told both of them. She watched her sisters walk down from the platform to the dock where their ship was moored. Maiden's Blush was the name of the three-masted ship upon which Jon, Nymeria, and Obara would travel to King's Landing, along with a portion of the Dornish army. Jon was next to say farewell. He kissed Prince Doran and Princess Arianne upon their hands, before he turned to Tyenn. She warmed to see him look upon her, and yet she was struck with a fierce, terrifying ache at the notion of his departure. She threw her arms around his neck and kissed him hard. She heard catcalls from the ship and docks as he kissed her possessively. She was his, and he was hers, and he seemed to want everyone to know. Not that she cared. She had little shame, though she liked to act as the example of utmost piety in public. He pulled away from her, his eyes impossibly dark. Don't make me a widow before I am a bride, my sweet. I shall make that my primary endeavor, my love. She kissed him again, soft upon the lips, cheek, and brow. Good. May the gods grant you favor as you journey on your way. He took her hand in his and kissed it softly. I do believe that the gods will be so kind. It seemed as though an eternity passed before he finally released her hand and walked toward the ship. Arianne reached for her hand and squeezed. They watched as the last of the people and chests were loaded onto the ship and the gangplank was raised. Obara, Nymeria, and Jon all waved to them as the ship began to row away from port. Tyenn prayed with her whole heart that the gods would keep all of them safe. Arula Stark chewed on her lip for a long while before deciding if she should bother Sansa. Today was her sister's name day. She knew that they should spend some of it together. Not that she wanted to see Sansa. She would have preferred to explore more of Blackhaven or to practice with Sario. She could spend time with Alysanne as well, but Alice was usually busy assisting Lady Saren for Lady Allyria's arrival. With Lady Allyria would come Lady Ashara. And thinking of Lady Ashara made Arya feel uncomfortable. Arya had awoken early to make a gift for Sansa. Mother would like that Arya had thought to make a gift for Sansa. So would Father. She wanted to prove to her mother and father that she was good when they weren't around, not that she should be nice to Sansa. It was her fault that they didn't have wolves anymore. She had awoken early and had asked permission to take flowers from the gardens. She had picked Sansa's favorite colors. There were orange, yellow, white, blue, purple, and pink flowers in the vase she brought to her sister. She stood at her sister's door, uncertain. Surely Sansa was awake. She knocked timidly, and her sister answered right away. Yes, who is it? Sansa, can I come in? A pause. Yes, Arya. Her voice did not seem particularly inviting, but Arya decided to enter anyway. I picked these for your name day, she announced, as she pushed open the door. She held out the flowers to her sister. Sansa was seated upon the edge of her bed, stitching a gown. She turned to her sister and seemed to consider the offer for a moment before she smiled. Thank you, Arya. She stood and walked to Arya. Her smile brightened as she looked at the flowers. They are lovely, her smile faltered, and she assumed her mother posture. Did you ask for permission? Arya flushed red. Why did her sister have to ask such stupid questions? Of course I did. Why can't you just say thank you when I do something nice? You aren't mother. You can't me what to do. Angry tears threatened to fall. Why was she crying? She couldn't cry. She wasn't a stupid baby like Rickon. Suddenly Sansa was taking the flowers from her and hugging her. I know I'm not mother, Sansa whispered, rubbing Oryer's back gently. Arya sniffled. Her cheeks were wet. Not that she would ever admit such a thing. I want to go home. She pulled away and dried her eyes with her sleeve. Don't tell Jane. Sansa shook her head. She was crying too. I won't tell Jatchier, but she misses home too. She bit her lower lip as tears leaked slowly from her eyes. And me? I miss home, and mother and father and our brothers. You wanted us to come here, Arya grumbled. I was betrothed to the prince, and father was made hand of the king. It was lovely at first. You haven't hated all of it either. She chewed on her lip and reluctantly agreed. She loved training with Sir Theophorel. She had enjoyed seeing so much of Westeros. She liked her half-brothers and half-sister, but she worried. She worried for Bran and father. She worried for her half-brothers and Edric Dayne, who were going to join the armies at King's Landing. She worried for Nymeria, who was alone somewhere in the Riverlands. Will they be safe in King's Landing? Sansa gave a tremulous smile. Father and our half-brothers will be safe. They will be victorious. I'm certain that we will be able to go home. Then we can tell Robb, Bran, and Rickon everything we have seen. Shaking. Uriah nodded in agreement. Maybe we can bring Alice, Jon, and Arthur with us. Sansa pressed her lips together. She looked too much like mother when she did that. Maybe. She looked at the flowers which she was still holding in one hand and smiled again. Thank you for the flowers. They are really pretty. She walked to a table which was beneath a window and placed the vase upon it. They look lovely here, don't you think? Uriah grinned. Perfect. Do you want to see if the cooks can make lemon cakes? Sansa giggled. Yes, come on, let's get Jane's. Do we have to? Arya replied with a wrinkled nose. Sansa rolled her eyes. Of course we do. Without us, Jane has no one here. Her father is still in King's Landing with our father. Her mother is still at Winterfell. We are all she has. Rosier sighed heavily and reluctantly agreed. It was her sister's name day. After all, fine. They left Sansa's room and retrieved Jane from her room before they went to the kitchens to speak with the cooks. They could have asked Elosian or Lady Siren or even the steward who took care of their needs, but they knew that if they went to the cooks, they would probably get treats that had just been made. Sure enough, and to the delight of all three girls, the cooks were willing and able to make lemon cakes for the evening meal. They also sent the girls from the kitchen with sweet bread that was filled with cherries and cinnamon. The girls spent the next hour or so walking in the gardens until the time arrived for their lessons. Lady Siren had asked the maester if he could make lessons for the girls so that they could continue learning while they were away from their family. Master Wyman had agreed. So for an hour every morning, the three girls were required to practice writing and sums. The next hour was spent with Septa Esmond, where they practiced their sewing. Arya liked Septa Esmond more than Septa Mordaunt. She never scolded Arya when she tangled her threads. The third hour was when Arya would practice with Serio Forel while Sansa and Jane learned how to play the lap harp with Septa Esmond. Arya loved practicing with Serio. She was learning so much with him. She was quieter, swifter, and more focused. Yet she did not enjoy swordplay as much as she had before. In Kingsland, she had spent time practicing swords with Edric, Jon, and Arthur. Now that they were gone away to war, she could not fully rest her heart in the joy of water dancing. She was afraid that she might never see her father or half-brothers again. She was pacing again, wearing a path in the floor of the chambers which were her prison. The food which her captors had provided had grown cold. Again, how could she eat it? She did not doubt that it was poisoned. Poison would be slow. They could kill her without a sword, and trick her father, tell him that she had fallen ill. Her stomach growled and she dug her nails into her forearms. She pressed her nails hard against her flesh until she could feel something, anything other than hunger. She was staring out the window when she looked down. She could see blood. Again, it had crusted on her pale skin, breaking open whenever she touched her arms. Her nails were stained with the blood she had drawn. She had to be careful with the cuts. She did not want an infection. She laughed. The tone seemed strange to her ears. She couldn't be mad. No, she had not broken for Robert Baratheon. She would not break for Renly Baratheon, Eddard Stark, or anyone else. They would not see her break. But they could take her head. She laughed again, choking on the tears that broke free. She was safe until they decided it was her time to die, until they took her head and the heads of her children. She almost didn't hear the knock on the door, or the voice of Lord Stark calling from beyond the door. A moment, she called. Did she still sound a queen? Did her voice still speak confidence? She pulled the sleeves of her gown down to her wrists and washed her hands clean in the basin. The blood was still beneath her nails, but she could lie about its cause if needed. She took a clean cloth and wiped her face free of any filth. Looking at her reflection in the glass, she hardly knew herself. She brushed her hair quickly and let it lay loose behind her. At least she was presentable. "You may enter," Cersei Lannister announced as she seated herself upon a chaise. Lord Stark entered slowly. His leg was still casted, but otherwise he was well dressed and adorned with the badges of his position as Hand of the King. "Such an honorable man, Lord Stark. It is so good to know that the Hand can visit his prisoners," she said bitterly. It had been weeks since her imprisonment had begun, and this was his first visit. "I heard that you have scarcely been eating by the look of your plate. I can see that much is true." His tone was neutral, formal. She could still speak with authority. She was still queen. She had earned her place as queen. Renly Baratheon was merely an usurper. "I am suspicious of food from men who seek my life." He walked to a chair near her and seated himself. "You are not yet condemned to death." She laughed. "Yet a word that tells me I shall die when it is most in the favor of Renly Baratheon. King Renly Baratheon." "King," she mulled over the word. "The king seeks to use me as a means to keep my father in line." He acknowledged her statement with a movement of his head. "You, your children, and your cousins who were within King's Landing at the time of King Robert's death. Your father marches to King's Landing with haste. It would not benefit any for you to be executed." "When will it be beneficial, Lord Stark? When will your new king decide that myself and my children are no longer worthy captives? When will you take my head and the heads of my children? Will they line the walls of the castle?" She seethed as she spoke, yet the words seemed to come from someone else. He did not respond to her at first. Instead, he merely looked at her for a long time. "King Renly has already pardoned your children in word and in writing. They are declared bastards, but will not be executed for the crimes of their parents. Did I not tell you that I would not see them harmed?" "You did," she agreed quietly. "It has also been decided that when they are of age, they shall be wed to children of lords who are loyal to the crown." She laughed, genuinely laughed. His discomfort spoke volumes for what fate awaited her children. "You will wed my children to you own." "Bastards for bastards! My son Arthur will wed Marcella, and Tommen will wed one of Prince Oberin's girls. The contracts have already been written. Lowborn bastard weddings for bastard children." Her jaw clenched. "Such tidy little futures you have designed for my children. Shall Joffrey wed your bastard girl?" He shifted in his seat and breathed deep. "No, your eldest son's fate has yet to be decided." "Why? You seem to have already planned the fate of so many others." "The king is not overfond of your eldest child. Neither am I." "Ah, but my younger children are easier for you to control. You can mold them into whatever shape your heart desires." She shook her head. "I am surprised that the Viper agreed to the match. He is in a generous state of mind. His niece shall be queen." She laughed again. "If her father did not save her, if Jaime did not save her, the fools would bring about their own destruction. I pity any woman who is forced to wed a Baratheon. Shall he warm her bed, or will she give him bastards? I wonder." He raised a brow, unbaited. "I doubt that Princess Arianne would be so foolish." "Is that what I was, foolish? Foolish to hate a man who loved a dead girl, to hate a man who whored with every woman in King's Landing? The Martell girl will grow to hate Renly Baratheon as much or more than I hated Robert." He ran a hand through his hair, weariness showing through in his responses to her. "Perhaps you are right. However, such matters are beyond my control. My duty is to ensure your health and well-being as a prisoner of the crown." He stood slowly, pained by the movement. "Eat your next meal, and you will be allowed a visit from your children. They all miss you and would likely welcome a visit from you." She was slow in responding, and venom seeped into her reply. How kind of my lord to consider such a courtesy. Will that be all? He bowed his head. For now, Lady Cersei. He turned from her and walked to the door. He did not even spare her a second glance when he departed from the room. She considered his words and the cold food upon the bureau. Eating seemed as though she was allowing them to win. Yet she did have her children to think upon. Should they live, she did not want them to think of her as weak. They should know that she was strong enough to thrive even after being deposed and locked away. She would show them that lions were not to be defeated. Some time later, she stood and walked to the tray. She would eat for her children, she decided. She would not eat to please Ned Stark or Renly Baratheon. She picked a grape from the tray and popped it into her mouth. She would do it for her children. The gates of Blackhaven were open to them as they arrived. Their travel party was small, 30 people who had ridden from Nightsong to Blackhaven. They had been a larger company when they had departed from Starfall, but their men now followed Lord Beric to King's Landing and war. The party which met them in the courtyard was small as well. Not that a large welcome was expected, though, for their new lady, Ashara Dayne, thought they might have made an exception. Ashara looked to her sister, who rode beside her. Illyria was weary of travel. Ashara knew her sister had never been much of a rider. She preferred carriages, yet she had ridden the entire way from Blackhaven with no complaint. A perfect lady for a castle, a perfect lady for Beric Dondarrion. Her heart broke for her sister. Illyria should be able to enjoy her new marriage. She should be riding to her new home with her new husband. Yet she rode to her new home while her husband rode north and east to war. Ashara hated that her sister might be a widow so soon after being wed. She hated that Aeron's only living child might die beside Lord Dondarrion. She hated that Arthur and Jon could die in battle. She hated that someday she could lose Lucas the same way. She hated war. Wars were inevitable, she knew, but were it her choice, there would be no wars. She knew she should be glad that her boys and nephew were old enough to go to war. So many children died young, but hers had all thrived. Yet what was the point of their thriving through childhood if they would only die upon a sword? If they would not live long enough to love, to wed, to have children of their own? Glancing behind her, she could see Lucas upon his mount, her last child, her baby. She could not bear to see him go to war as well. Arthur's departure had been too difficult. She could not watch another one of her children ride to war. If any of them died, the sight of Aeson standing beside Lady Cersei Dondarrion in the courtyard diverted her dark thoughts. Aeson's smile was brilliant, illuminating her whole face. Nothing was more precious to Asha than the smiles of her children, her beautiful babes, though her daughter was now a lovely young woman, not a babe or a girl. She should be wed soon, Asha knew, though there had been no thought made toward wedding her daughter to anyone. There were too many people in the yard for Ashara to spur her horse forward any faster than the slow gait at which they were traveling. A few minutes later, they reached the grooms. As soon as one of the grooms took the reins of the horse, Ashara slid from her mount. Mere moments later, Ashara was met by Alysanne, launching herself into her arms. "My sweet girl," Ashara, kissing her daughter on both cheeks. She smoothed her daughter's hair with both hands, memorizing her face, as though they had not seen one another in years. She was crying and laughing at the same time as she held her little girl. "Mama," Alice laughed. "I am so glad to see you. Was the wedding lovely? How was your journey?" "All was well, sweetling. I have missed you greatly." She kissed her cheek again before releasing her so that she could greet Lucas and Illyria, who had both dismounted. Alice turned first to her brother, whom she picked up and spun with her hug. He did not seem thrilled that she was still able to lift him, but he could do little but comply with her actions. "You've grown taller," she exclaimed, as she set her brother upon the ground again. "Soon I won't be able to lift you at all." "Good." "And I have," he replied as he straightened his clothes. "Mother had the seamstresses make me new shirts and trousers." He shifted the conversation quickly. "Arthur said that our half-sisters are here." Alice nodded slowly. "They are inside. I shall take you to them soon." She turned away from Lucas to greet her aunt with a much more restrained and polite, though no less enthusiastic greeting. "Aunt Illyria, or should I say Lady Dondarrion?" Illyria blushed slightly at her new title. "I shall always be your aunt, sweetling." She kissed Alysanne on both cheeks in greeting. "And the wedding was lovely. I will be certain to tell you everything later." "Thank you, Alozier replied, grinning broadly. Illyria then turned to Cersei Dondarrion. "Lady Cersei, it is a pleasure to see you again." Seren smiled sweetly at her three new guests. Welcome to your new home, Lady Alleria. It has been a pleasure to prepare Blackhaven for your arrival as its new lady. Welcome to our family. Thank you, Seren. It is a pleasure to be the Lady of Blackhaven and your brother's wife. The women grasped one another's arms and kissed on the cheek. The pleasure is ours, Alleria. I am glad to see that you, as well as your sister and nephew, have arrived safely. News has arrived which is relevant to both you and Lady Ashara. We can discuss that now if you wish, or after all of you have been settled into rooms. Illyria breathed deep. Ashara wished that she could help her sister, but Illyria was the Lady of Blackhaven. This was her place to make decisions. I think that we should review whatever letters have arrived before we are settled into our rooms. I am certain that Illyria should be able to escort her brother to his assigned chambers, while all relevant information is discussed with myself and my sister. Of course. Seren turned from Illyria to Ilisan and one of the men of House Dondarrion. Alyssa, trust that with Dowlin's help, you should be able to show the men of your mother's house where everything should be taken. Yes, Lady Seren Alice replied readily. Then we will take our leave of you, Seren replied with a brisk nod of her head. Lady Alleria, Lady Ashara, if you will come with me. Ashara turned quickly to her children after she and Illyria acknowledged Seren. Lucas, stay with Alice. Yes, Mama, her son replied. Our son smiled. I'll be certain to take him to his chambers when everyone is settled. I'm certain that you will, sweetling. Ashara turned to follow her sister and Seren. She feared that the news Seren would tell them concerned her sons or nephew. She spared a glance back at her children. Lucas seemed somewhat bereft, standing beside his sister. Alicerd was already directing the men of Starfall where they should go with the chests that were being unloaded from the wagons. Her daughter seemed so ready and eager to direct the household. Perhaps it was time to begin considering where her daughter's future should lead. They walked through the corridors of the castle until they arrived at the Lord's Solar. The desk was littered with several letters. Seren flitted about the room as soon as they arrived. She offered them seats and refreshments. Ashara and Illyria chose to remain standing, so that they might stretch their sore muscles. Both accepted wine to drink. Seren eventually seated herself upon a cushioned window seat to tell them news of the realm. The letters are upon the desk. You may, of course, read them at your leisure. 2 were forwarded from Starfall. Both are written by Lord Eddard Stark. 2 were sent from Sunspear. 1 is from Prince Doran, and the other is from Prince Oberin. I have read all 4, though only to see if there was urgent information to share with you immediately. There is only a bit of news from King's Landing regarding the war. Lord Stark and Prince Oberin have written that Lord Tybrin has armies in the Riverlands and more marching toward the Crownlands. Word has also arrived that an army of Northerners under the direction of Robb Stark is on their way south. They have reached Moat Cailin. We knew much of that at Nightsong, Ashara stated, annoyed that Seren Dondarrion had taken it upon herself to read letters which were from Ned. Ned's letters had been hers to read, not Seren's. Ashara reminded herself that Seren was young, only 8 and 10, and merely doing her duty. Indeed, Lady Ashara, I was simply informing you of what I read. Betrothals have also been announced in the letters. King Renly has promised to wed Princess Ariane Martell. A match has also been made to unite House Tyrell to the cause of the crown. Marjorie Tyrell and Prince Quentyn Martell are betrothed as well. Both of those marriages are pledged to take place once the immediate threat to King's Landing is settled. Illyria laughed. That is wonderful news. Asha, it seems that some wrongs will finally be set to right. A Martell upon the throne again. Should that thought be a happy one? Elia and her children were still dead. Now Elia's niece would be thrust into danger as well. Ashara forced a thin smile to her lips. I am certain that Elia's brothers are pleased with this turn of events. Is there any further news? Simran nodded, sheepish. I do apologize, Lady Ashara. I read all of the letters, as I said, so that I might know if there was any urgent news. Lord Stark wrote to you of plans regarding your sons. Ashara's eyes narrowed. What about her sons? What matter did he write regarding? It seems that he has pledged your sons to wed. He apologizes for the suddenness of the decision. Jon has pledged to Tyson Prince Oberin's third-born daughter, Arthur. He has pledged to Myrcella Hill, formerly Baratheon, Cersei Lannister's daughter. For a few moments Easher could do nothing but stare blankly at Seren. How could Ned promise her sons to anyone? The children were hers to care for, to protect. What had he done for them? She breathed deep, willing her emotions to stay inside. Jon wasn't hers to decide his fate. She knew that well enough from the day he had been given to her. Did Ned not tell her that very same day that he would find a match for Alicent when she was of age? Why would he not seek to make matches for the other children as well? She scarcely noticed that Aeria had picked up a letter from the desk until it was pressed to her hand. "I believe this is the letter." Ashara seated herself and read the letter slowly, trying to make sense of the words. Ned's words informed her that the match between Jon and Tyene was Oberin's initial suggestion. Apparently, Prince Oberin had mentioned the affection Jon and Tyene had for one another. She knew the true reason. She knew that Oberin and likely Doran wanted to ensure that Jon was theirs. She wished that Oberin had never learned the truth about Jon. She wished that he could have been kept safe instead of becoming a game piece for the Martells to use. Jon was her son, more than he was ever Lyanna Stark's. She had nursed him with Allies and Arthur. She had kissed his hurts and rocked him to sleep. He was her son. But he did love Tyene Sand. Even if the Martells had not been plotting since Jon's infancy to control him, Ashara thought it likely that he would have grown to love one of Prince Oberin's girls. With the change of kings in King's Landing, the foolish idea of Prince Doran to wed Jon to Arianne was now nothing but a passing thought of long ago. Arianne being the queen was all that mattered to the Martells. That and the death of Tyene Lannister. She was glad that Arianne would not wed her son. Prince Doran's young daughter was far too spirited and intemperate for her son. Ashara returned her attention to the letter. The decision to betroth Arthur to Myrcella was purely for political reasons. King Renly wanted to ensure that Cersei Lannister's children were controlled, and how better to control them than to wed her children to the children of his greatest allies. As such, Tommen, the former prince, would wed one of Prince Oberin's younger daughters when the children were of age. Politically, Ashara agreed, yet the thought of her children being treated as pieces in a game was more than she wished to bear. As she read further, she learned that Jon had not been forced into the betrothal. She nearly laughed. She knew that Jon adored Oberin's third daughter. He likely had jumped at the chance to wed T. Apparently, Tyene had chosen to agree to the match as well. Perhaps that match was not so bad as her initial gut reaction had been. Truth be told, she knew nothing of Cersei Lannister's daughter, other than the fact that the girl was a child. Perhaps Arthur could be happy with the arrangement. Perhaps the former princess could be happy with her son. For now, both were too young for the betrothal to mean much at all. She eventually set aside the letter. "It seems that Lord Stark believes that my children are useful for making alliances, though I suppose that is the way of the world. Thank you, Lady Siren, for telling us this information." She read the remaining 3 letters, trading them with her sister as they read. When they were finished, she asked where her rooms would be located. When Siren told her the answer, she excused herself. She needed to rest, and to prepare herself for meeting with Ned's daughters. Sansa and Arya Stark followed Yatsan and Lucas Sand to the Solar, where they would dine with Lady Siren Dondarrion, Lady Alyria Dondarrion, and Lady Ashara Dayne. She and Arya walked stiffly, with their heads held high. There was no way to hide their anxieties, nor was there truly a way for them to hide their surprise in meeting their youngest half-brother. They had known about Lucas, of course. They had known about all 4 of their half-siblings. Sansa and Arya had watched the arrival of the Danes from a window which overlooked the courtyard. They had jostled one another to see the woman who their father must have loved. At least Sansa thought that her father must have loved Lady Ashara. Not that her father didn't love her mother. Her parents loved one another very much. She did not understand why he had not been faithful to Mother, except if he loved another as well. Could someone love more than one person? The knights in stories never loved anyone but their maidens. Lordy had claimed that she wasn't interested in seeing or meeting Lady Ashara, but she had squeezed herself beside Sansa so that they could see her when she arrived. They hadn't seen much, as Ashara had spent little time in the courtyard, and they were too far away to truly see her. They had then watched while Atson assisted with the direction of the horses, carts, and chests, while a young boy stood beside her. They tired of watching after a time and returned to the common area of their suite of rooms. It had been while they were nibbling at the remnants of their mid-morning meal when Outson had arrived with Lucas. Sansa had gasped when she saw the boy. She noticed Arya's eyes widen at the sight of him as well. She had not often thought of what her half-siblings might look like. Jon and Arthur both resembled father just as Arya did. Alice said that she resembled her mother and that Lucas did as well. Yet, looking at Lucas, it was not Alicent that Sansa saw, but Bran. There were differences between her full and half-brothers, yet the similarities stole Sansa's breath away. Bran's hair was red and Lucas's was dark brown, but Bran's hair had always been the darkest of the reds. Bran's eyes were blue, as Robb and Rickon and Sansa's were all blue, but his were a deep blue, as deep as the sea. Lucas's eyes were dark purple, yet their faces were the same shape, their smiles crooked in just the same way. Even in personality and temperament, as Sansa would learn, the boys were very similar. After spending a few hours awkwardly attempting conversation, during which Aslian and Sansa did more talking than Arya and Lucas combined, they were summoned to their dinner. Sansa could feel the tension radiating from her sister as they entered the room. Sansa felt anxious as well, but she promised herself that she would not glare or be impolite to Lady Ashara. When they entered, they were greeted kindly by Lady Siren, and then introduced to Lady Asliera and Lady Ashara. Ashara was lovely, Sansa noticed at once. She felt angry quite suddenly, though she did not quite know why. Father loved Mother, and Mother was beautiful, more beautiful than this woman from Dorne. She stared at the woman even as they were all seated. Her hair was nearly black, though strands of silver streaked her hair. She had remarkable eyes, the same as Alicent and Lucas, all deep shades of purple and violet. Mother was still prettier than Lady Ashara, Sansa thought fiercely. They all greeted one another politely as they were seated. Shortly after sitting, the first course was laid before them. Sansa averted her eyes from Lady Ashara to the food that was placed before her. The first course was rabbit soup. Sansa watched the carrots and greens float in the soup as she moved her spoon. She stared at it as though her food was the most fascinating thing she had ever seen. They did not speak during the soup. When the fish was laid before them, Lady Adelia broke the silence by attempting conversation, as was her duty as the hostess.